just when you thought it was safe to put on your headphones? You entered the darkest, wildest, sexiest depths of technology. And here to keep you on the bleeding edge of science, tech, and ethics is the Rated R radio star, the man of tomorrow, the golden stallion of the tech world, Brian Sovryn. He has a huge brain. And now, here's Brian.
Woo! Just coming off! Well, let me tell you what I was coming off. Oh, wait a second, that could be taken a few ways. Baby, the Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the Rated R, radio star. Here for you for a little Sovryn Tech this week, as always, and I know people get so excited. Hell, I've had some people, they call it Sov crack, because they want more, Woo! Well, you got it, baby. Oh, and this week we had some for Patreon, had some great shows for Patreon this week. If you're not a Sovryn Tech patron yet, please, sovryntech.com, SOVRYN tech.com, just in case you're listening to me on one of the many affiliates that I have, and, you didn't realize, hey, what the hell is this shit? So, but let me tell you, this is high-impact science and tech news, baby. It's the real deal. Now, as far as what I was coming off of, last night, oh, man, I'm going to get into it during the climax, during that segment of the show, because I was having flashbacks, good ones. I thought, for a second there, I thought it was like 1992 again. I mean, I was living the dream a little bit last night, let me tell you. And I'll break into it later, but I was playing Double Dragon 4. Woo! Yeah, Double Dragon 4. I was listening to the 30th anniversary re-release of Judas Priest Turbo. Woo! My favorite Judas Priest album. Oh, baby, at the same time, I mean, I was, what am I supposed to think, right? Which, of course, 30th anniversary, so, that came out in 87. I love that album. Turbo Lover, baby. Oh, yeah, almost opened the show with it, but I held back. Because we got to get right into the good stuff this week. And, we're going to get into, now, we're not, last week, and actually, I got to say, just real quick before we do get into the Foreplay, our little, tech stories for the week. But last week, I got a lot of emails from people, saying that they really appreciated the conversation I had about anarchism. And I think it might have actually brought on a lot of new listeners, and I appreciate that. Because maybe a lot of Sovryn Tech listeners, have never really heard anybody talk about anarchism, or never really heard a lot of these differing aspects of it, which we kind of broke into in the idea that, division is a good thing. Not being united is actually, that's the very heart of individualism and human growth. So anyway, thank you all for the great emails. I got a couple tweets, people saying, wow, you don't understand shit about this or that. And it's like, yeah, okay. Say what you want, baby. Whatever. I always tease this. Someday I will do it. Is like, I'll read my actual hate mail. I mean, you'd be amazed. Not that if anybody brought up like a really great argument or like a solid rebuttal to something I said, I mean, I'd read it outright, because I'd be like, well, guess what? I'm wrong, because I don't mind admitting when I'm wrong on this show. But that's generally not what happens at all. So, though, actually, speaking of that, later on in the show, I am actually going to read some listener emails that have to do, not to say necessarily that I'm wrong, but just some differing opinions on the concept of lucid dreaming. So we're going to get into that perhaps during our Internet of Targets segment, which is where I first brought up the concept of lucid dreaming, because was it the iBand Plus, which was supposed to kind of, get you in the middle of the night, have you it initiates lucid dreaming perhaps. And I thought the claim was very dubious, but I'm going to read some response emails to that, because it's got some that's the thing. When I get an intelligent response, I'll gladly read it. I'll read it right on the damn show. And so I'm going to read those later on in the show. But I will say that we're also going to, we're not going to get necessarily into anarchism, but we are going to get into somewhat of the political. We have a very important subject to talk about that is very, very relevant to really the political climate that we're in right now. Totally tech related. I mean, totally tech related. It's a really important subject that I want everybody to listen to, and I'm going to be giving actionable tips for going forward, again, in the present political climate that we live in. So, but before we get into that main story, and yes, we're going to be talking about President Trump. Whenever you say political climate, that's pretty much, he is the great dark cloud that is hanging over everybody, bringing tons of bad luck. But anyway, let's get into some of the foreplay. Let's open this baby up. This was interesting. This actually happened a couple weeks ago, and this is the thing. There's no way all of the interesting tech stories that come out during the week, it's in one 2-hour show, which Sovryn Tech is every single week, every Saturday it comes out. There is just no way that I can possibly cover every single little tidbit of interest that I have. Now, if we get enough Patreon subscribers, I get to where that, I'm doing 2 or even 3 shows a week. Yeah, maybe I can actually get to it all, but otherwise, sometimes I have to, push some stuff back, to be able to get into the nitty gritty on larger subjects, perhaps. So anyway, this happened a couple weeks ago, and it really, this is something that shocked the world, and at least the tech world anyway. And that is Google Voice came back, or not that it ever left, but it seemed abandoned. Okay. It seemed that Google was, just like, all right, we're having everything go to Hangouts and, forget about Google Voice. We'll just kind of let it die. And I mean, when you download it, whether for iOS or Android, or you just look at the web interface or whatever, if you looked at Google Voice and what it was offering, I mean, everything, it just, it looked like shit. I mean, by comparison to today's standards of things. Personally, I mean, understand the Golden Stallion, I just as well have the internet look like the 90s. Like I remember when Amazon, what they were celebrating their 20th anniversary or something like that. And they had the front page go back to looking like the website did in 95 or 96, whatever. And I was like, oh, this is genius. This is so functional. This is so utilitarian. This works. Oh man, could they go back to this permanently? I'd love it. But of course, not everybody has that taste, or desire for such an aesthetic, but I get it. So anyway, now Google Voice, they were just updated. They updated the apps, they updated the web interface, and now it looks very, very modern. I mean, just like it belongs in 2016 or 2017. Very, very, impressive look. Now, here's the thing, okay? I recommend that as much as anybody can, don't use a Google account. I have to, and I'm understand, or the fact that I have to face, like 2015, I was rallying on that pretty hard. But what I've come to learn really in 2016, 2017 is that it's near impossible to do business today, any kind of business without a Google account, or at least without having something that allows you to take advantage without using some kind of Google software anyway. Maybe you could get away with not having a Google account, but you're going to end up having you have to use Chromium or Chrome particularly. I talked about this on a recent Patreon Q&A episode where, there's just, and it sucks. I mean, there's features that Google has baked into the web browser, Google Chrome, that really you can only use, for Google services that you can really only use in Google Chrome. I mean, there's even and it's not just Google, there's other companies where they have very specific features that only seem to work really well in Chrome. For example, if you're using, say you're a Microsoft guy, if you're using OneDrive, of all ironies, the best OneDrive, the best Office Online, shall we say, experience comes on Google Chrome with the ability, the more unique ability to upload files and folders, through the web interface. into OneDrive, I mean, pretty much you have to use Chrome. I mean, I guess with WebKit, you could use Opera, you could use Safari probably, and I think Edge might have finally baked some of that in. But bottom line being, for the most rock solid experience, I mean, you use Chrome. It's, in my opinion, it's so nuts. And there's that 5% of code that Google keeps closed source for Chrome. They open up everything else, but there's just that little 5% that they always keep locked up. And that's where I think that's obviously where a lot of this magic happens. And yeah, so I get it that a lot of people, like, they just do going to work and whatever else, they can't, or even entrepreneurs, they can't not use a Google account and a lot of Google's features. So for the reason that, one, Google Voice seemed to be being abandoned and was getting replaced by Hangouts, which has also been, Hangouts is now the thing that is being backtracked and turned into near legacy software. Because of that, because Google Voice had been abandoned, and because I don't, was recommending, look, stay away from using Google services at all. Look, I didn't recommend getting a Google Voice number anymore. I mean, I just didn't, it was too much trouble. And I figured it was going to be going away eventually anyway. And you could just use the Hangouts like web interface if you really wanted to, and that eventually your phone number would just be ported into Hangouts. This is no longer true. So, and now, I mean, you can't take Google at its word for anything, in my opinion, because they'll cancel any service. I mean, understand, like, what happened like 4 years ago was they had, this is like April 2013, I want to say, where Google was talking about Project Babel or Project Babel, depending on which way you want to say it. And granted, there are very different definitions for both of the ways you phrase that, but, Tower Babel, but which is interesting, considering what that has to mean towards language. But Project Babel or Project Babel, whatever, was about unifying all of these different Google chat services into one thing. And when Project Babel started, that's when Google Voice seemed to be pushed to the wayside. Like, okay, yeah, we're not going to deal with that anymore. And like when you got a Google Fi, right, mobile plan, that you would end up, your Google Voice number would just port into Hangouts and all that. I mean, now all of that is completely changing. Now it seems like they're back to just like Project Babel has been completely abandoned, bottom line. Okay, because now you have Allo, now you have Google Voice is back and being updated. And they said specifically in their blog post about it, at the good old AlphaGoog website, that they're going to, they're going to keep refreshing. They're going to keep this maintained. They're going to keep adding features. They're talking about adding VoIP calling, voice over IP. They're talking about adding RCS support for messaging, which is kind of like a new version of MMS effectively, a little bit better about that. And I mean, they're taking it seriously. Like this is the real deal that they're doing with Google Voice. So, but that's what's funny is that now they've totally backtracked from their plan, what was meant to be just a huge plan. Not that they ever really implemented it very well. There was always lots of little flukes. Hangouts wouldn't work exactly right. In fact, even still to this day, and now it's even worse, Hangouts doesn't work exactly right. But yeah, this just goes to show, I mean, so here's the funny thing is that I'm saying I get that people have to use Google services, and you might as well use Google Voice now. In fact, there's been interesting arguments made, and I didn't make these anymore, and I understand them. I didn't make them anymore because I figured Google Voice was just going to die soon enough. But there's interesting arguments to be made that having a Google Voice number could, using that to secure things could actually, and then in conjunction with either like a YubiKey or an app like Authy or Google Authenticator, a two-factor authentication app, that, you could, it's a great way to really lock down an account. Now, I'm not breaking down how to go about that, okay, but I didn't, I understood those arguments, but I never, quote unquote, lobbied for them because I figured Google Voice was going to die. But so here's the thing is that, while I'm saying I get that people have to use some of Google's services just to like make it in the world today, it seems, at the same time, like never, ever, ever rely on their services. And as for some people, as great as it is that Google Voice is now back up to snuff and is going to supposedly get long-term support, the fact that it was already abandoned and then suddenly they changed their mind and now they have completely stepped away from a huge company-wide program like Project Babel or Project Babel. That just goes to show, do not trust a single thing that Google puts out there. Do not rely on a single service that they've got. I mean, it's a miracle that YouTube is as consistent as it is. It really is. Of course, that's probably why it was its own company even before Google became Alphabet, and became like a parent company with a bunch of little companies underneath. YouTube was always separate, probably because they knew, hey, we're just, we're going to fuck with people all, here at Google all day long and take away services from them willy-nilly. But YouTube, we got to make sure that stays solid, which also proves the point that I've said for years now, that really Google's not even a search company anymore. YouTube is their bread and butter. And that in the future, Google is really just going to be an entertainment company entirely. Because art is the thing that, art never gets old. Art doesn't have growth limits effectively, right? So anyway, it's a whole other conversation, but it is very interesting that Google Voice is back. And I mean, I've looked at the interface. It's slick. It's modern. I get it, but it's here. But also understand that is really just more of a harbinger that you never want to rely on Google's shit. You never want to rely on Google services because they'll change their minds in drastic fashion, over and over and over again, which this is just proof of, because again, now Hangouts is effectively, the dead duck, as it were. So anyway, let's get into another story here. And actually real quick, tomorrow, that'll be Sunday. This is getting released on February 4th, 12,017. Woo, HE baby. Tomorrow on Sunday, that would be the 5th of February. I'm actually we're going to try. Well, let's see how well Hangouts work still. Because I'm going to do a live hangout with Sovryn Tech patrons and patrons only. So if you want to become a part of that, also it will be available to all future patrons. They can watch that episode. In fact, I'll probably make audio out of it, and that will be released in the Patreon feed. So something to look forward to, perhaps. We'll try and make it happen. There's a chance that, hey, I mean, Hangouts has been such a fuck up lately. I mean, just playing it straight. I have to use it for some of my clients, and it can be so bad. I mean, not something you want to rely upon at all. Of course, more particularly Hangouts, the aspect of Hangouts I'd be using is more like YouTube Live, and so that, they're rebranding things all the time. Again, don't rely on these fucking Google services. But as long as everything works out, tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern, I'll be doing a YouTube Live whatever, and or Hangouts whatever. And, I'll be fielding live questions, the whole business. It should be a good time. So anyway, on to other news. Now, this is a bit of news. This is also something that happened a couple weeks ago. Not a huge deal. Not a whole ton to say on this. But, it's kind of interesting. And that is Mozilla has, of course, the creators of Firefox and one of my favorite browsers, SeaMonkey, as well as a ton of other software and one of my favorite programming languages, that being Rust. They have done a rebranding. Not that they changed their name, even though I might recommend that, but then I guess that would cause a whole ton of confusion. But Mozilla, I mean, the name makes sense as long as you know the history, as long as you're from the 90s, it makes sense. But they rebranded to where now they're, before their lettering, I didn't think did anything special. I don't know. But now their branding is Mozilla, but it's spelled MOZ://A. Just like if you're typing in HTTP, right? And then, colon, so, right. So the colon, then the 2 slashes makes up Mozilla. It makes up the ill in Mozilla. So Mozilla is the illest. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. It looks cool. I get it. I think it definitely, kind of their point that they're making about it is they want people to know that they are an internet centric company, that they are all all internet all the time, blah, 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 or, whatever. And it makes sense. I mean, it works. Ironically, how many web browsers, Firefox included, are getting rid of most of the code or, coding that you see in the address bar, right? How many people really see HTTPS anymore? I mean, most people don't. You just see I don't know, you'll see zog.ninja, you'll see that part of the web address, or of the URL, but most of the URL coding, it doesn't even show up anymore. So it's kind of dumb. like if you're trying to reach out to a larger amount of people, but definitely the entire company obviously is going through a severe refocusing. They have, there were some other interesting developments recently. What was it? Project Quantum? Was it Quantum, where they were building in that new into Gecko? They were starting to replace it with that new web rendering engine. I think it's Quantum. That has been becoming a thing, as well as I think the death knell, if I remember hearing right this week, that really the death knell for Firefox OS, which that was supposed to be a thing, where it was an operating system based off of Firefox, just like Chrome OS, they laid off like everybody in the connected devices team over at Mozilla. So the company's going through huge changes. Now, frankly, the place where I think, anything that Mozilla does really still shines, is, well, one of them, ironically, they don't really support anymore, which doesn't, or, their support has been scaling back quite a bit over the past couple of years, which I can't grasp. Like Thunderbird is frankly, Thunderbird is way more important than Firefox. That's my opinion on the matter. But I think it's so. The man of tomorrow, me, I live in Thunderbird, it seems, way more than I do in a web browser, frankly. Not that I have any problem with Firefox. I think it's a fine web browser. I think, starting to bake in the new rendering engine. There's been some moves that Firefox has made as late that I don't approve of. I thought baking in Pocket was just stupid. Why would you put in all that closed source stuff? And there's other things that they've been doing with Adobe where they're baking in closed source. I think that's a ridiculous idea. I still don't know where the fuck their Chrome or the support for Chrome extensions. There was supposed to be a compatibility layer. We talked about that like 3 years ago. Where the fuck is that? And so, I don't know what they're doing there. But so there's so many things that they've said that they want to do, or recent actions that they've taken. I also don't like the way that they went with like a multi-process architecture recently. I talked about that on Sovryn Tech for way longer than I should have, because it just kind of ticked me off. I really liked the fact that Firefox had one singular process that you could shut down, and you weren't playing whack-a-mole like you do with the Blink based like Chrome web browsers. But whatever. So a lot of the technical decisions in Firefox, Firefox desktop, I should say, I've not approved of. I don't dig it. But the companies definitely, they have a direction they're looking to go into, and usually when you do a major rebranding, which they just did with their logo, that usually means that there's a lot of changes, kind of coming down the pike. One of the changes I wish they'd pull a Google, and like they did with Google Voice, and say, oh, guess what? We are completely, rededicating ourselves to Thunderbird. Everybody uses Thunderbird. Remember that picture that we talked about this months ago, that Instagram picture that Zuckerberg made, where you saw his computer. He had a Mac, he had a MacBook, and like all the USB ports were taped. His camera was covered, and everybody was going nuts about how crazy he was about privacy. And yet he runs he runs Facebook, which is the most anti-privacy thing on the planet. But you got to look at what software he had in his dock on Mac OS, and he had Google Chrome, which was interesting. But then right next to it was Thunderbird. And that's what I'm saying. Thunderbird is so important. Anybody getting shit done is probably using Thunderbird in some form or fashion. Not to say there aren't other great email clients. Claw's Mail is a personal favorite of mine. There's plenty out there to take advantage of, no doubt. But boy, I wish, if they're rededicating themselves, if they're rebranding, I would leap onto Thunderbird, because look, email's not going anywhere. Especially considering that, even recently, and understand this, I would be very, very particular about this, because I complain about email newsletters all the time, or like email scams, not email scams, but like scams by people who are just wanting to get your email address. And you'll get these free 2 books when you might already be signed up to the newsletter, and that they're just building another list, and they're going to sell it off to people, an email list, and they're going to sell it off to, forever many hundreds of thousands of dollars to advertisers and all that, because people recognize now, advertisers are recognizing now, that you get 100% engagement when you deal in email. pretty much. Or maybe it's not 100%, but it's dang near in comparison to Facebook ads and Google ads and all this. So email is, still a heavy reality. And the ability, how easy it is to set up PGP and Thunderbird. Holy shit. It's not as easy, honestly, and it's amazing to say this. It's not as easy on Android anymore, but it's there. So I really wish they'd rededicate themselves to that. The one area, though, that actually I really think they need to concentrate and keep spending time, and it appears that they are, is with the mobile browsers that Mozilla makes. This includes Focus for iOS, which I have heard nothing but great things from Sovryn Tech listeners about. They love that web browser. In fact, I think it's doing so well that Google started shitting bricks, because now they've allowed, Google just this week announced that you can use, again, that 95% of free code, of open code for Chrome, that they have released it and have made it available to where on iOS, other companies can now make Chrome-based web browsers, as to where before that wasn't possible. So they're probably like freaking out because, oh shit, Firefox is actually starting to get some market share in the mobile browser space. And good. On Android, it is every single time. It is the very first thing that, in fact, right now, never mind. I'm not going to let that cat out of the bag. I'm just saying the very first thing I recommend to anybody, if they want to get serious about security on their mobile devices, if you have an Android device, is you install Firefox for Android. And then you install, because it allows for extensions. And you can install all, a bunch of different, you can put on ad blockers, you can put on all this great shit, to really significantly improve your web experience on a mobile device. I recommend that. And also, the security features as well are the fact that Firefox, it runs almost sandboxed in a way, not literally, but almost sandboxed on Android, to where it uses its own separate security certificates. So if something infects, and this goes both ways. If something affects Android, it doesn't affect Firefox. If something affects Firefox, it doesn't infect the rest of your Android device, or at least not so readily. It's such a no-brainer to use that there. And it seems to be pretty popular, and they keep putting in new features, far more new features into the mobile version of Firefox than they do the desktop. So maybe they know, kind of where their bread and butter is going to be coming from here in the near future, if not already right now. If that's where they're going to concentrate, and if they're, baking in, again, that Project Quantum, which is that, kind of the replacement or hybrid of Gecko, of the Gecko rendering engine. Awesome, cool, great. So I find that to be particularly interesting. Extensions in apps is really, it's interesting to see how this is going to go. I know this week, Microsoft also announced that their Outlook mobile app for iOS and Android, which, barring privacy concerns and barring the fact that you're using Microsoft software, I've tested it, as a mobile app, as an email app, and it's actually probably next to K9 Mail, it's probably the best email app on those platforms. It's just phenomenal. For the average everyday consumer, again, if we're talking privacy, you're going K9, you're using, Open Keychain and all that. But that they said they're going to start allowing for extensions into that. And I think that's just going to be huge, because no one else is doing that. Gmail's not allowing for that. That's going to shoot Gmail right in the foot. So this is, the idea of extensions on apps. It's been a thing for a while, but very few of them really do it well. And Firefox is one that has. And of course, I imagine Outlook Mail will as well. So anyway, the Mozilla, the brand change. Well, I hope they're it's definitely all about concentrating on other things. And the two areas where in my opinion, they need to keep concentrating is Thunderbird, get right back on that horse. And then of course, the mobile version or the mobile browsers that they've created, particularly Focus for iOS and of course Firefox itself for Android, I think are the directions that they should be looking. So just a couple other things here, I guess let's get to in the Foreplay. And one of them is actually a service that I heard about. Now, I've gotten asked this, and I've actually addressed it recently on Patreon Q&A episodes, where you can ask me any question you want. It doesn't even have to be tech-related, but you can ask me any question you want. Often it is tech-related, and I will answer it. And I was asked about what are like really great, cloud services that I could take advantage of, perhaps, and maybe ones that have privacy in mind or encryption or things like this. And there really aren't, there are some cloud services out there, okay, that are encryption, they have encryption in mind, security, privacy, all that. But really the big ones out there, Google Drive, Dropbox, Box, OneDrive, those are kind of the major ones, I think. You can't really, there's no real competitors against those. Not with the full feature set that they have. And especially if you want to be sharing things, like sharing photos, or sharing, videos, things like this. But recently there was a very interesting solution that I was just looking at, and it's called Cryptomator. Cryptomator.org. I put the link in the show notes for episode 211 if you want to find it there. But it's crypto, just the word crypto, and then Mator, MATOR.org. That's the website to find this. Now, what this does, so there's been a few features like that. Like there was Decryptbox, I think it was called, a few years ago that came out. And there have been some others. And the problem is that a lot of these encryption schemes for what Decryptbox and some of these other ones would do is they would actually just encrypt client side, whatever you wanted to encrypt. And then they would store it on, say, OneDrive, Google Drive, or Dropbox, or whatever. Okay. So that was kind of the idea. The problem is that you're really, it wasn't open source, and that creates an issue of trust when it's closed source. Trust, for at least somebody that's really serious about security, in my opinion. Well, I'm not going to get into that conversation about open source versus closed source here. But Cryptomator is kind of the same idea, to where it works in conjunction. It does all the encryption client side. It works in conjunction with whatever cloud service you happen to be using, and it will, it'll encrypt it on your computer before it sends it up. Now there's some issues with that. Okay. Because, the good thing is Cryptomator is open source. And it is free, though I think they ask for donations or whatever, and it works completely cross-platform: Windows, Mac, Linux, iOS, and the Android app is actually in beta. So you don't get it through the Play Store. So obviously if it's in beta, don't trust it with your life. But anyway, it does the whole thing, 256 AES encryption, all the good stuff. The encryption looks pretty good for what it is. Again, they're sort of just starting out. Keep that in mind. But the thing with doing cloud storage in this way, to where you are encrypting it client side, and when it gets to, OneDrive or Google Drive or Dropbox, whatever, that you can't really access it, understand that, it kind of defeats the purpose for a lot of people of why they want cloud storage, is so that they can share things, right? So it's an interesting that you might want to look at it as a solution. It's just something that came up. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about it. But if you're looking for how can I encrypt stuff in my cloud storage, this might be a way to go. This would not work well, like, say, if you wanted to cloud store, movies or videos and things like this, and be able to watch it on a web interface somewhere else. Obviously, that's not going to work, really work well for this. But there's certainly, I could see where there'd be a use case for this sort of thing. So check it out, cryptomator.org. I thought it looked interesting enough anyway. Okay. So last bit here for the Foreplay, and this one, I'm not going to get into a huge subject on it either, but Microsoft announced, kind of leaked, but then announced a new Windows version. Okay. And it's called Windows 10 Cloud. Now, again, as we all know, there is never, or supposedly, quote unquote, there's never going to be another version of Windows. It's always, everything's going to be Windows 10 from here into eternity. Much like, OS 10 was really supposed to be the thing forever until they finally rebranded to Mac OS. But Windows 10 Cloud, you can kind of probably just from the name, you can guess where this is going. They are looking at the Chromebook market. Okay. They are looking at Chrome OS, and Windows 10 Cloud, from what I've seen of it, I've checked out videos. I have not downloaded it or installed it or anything. And it's still very much like in an alpha or beta form, or what Microsoft would call an insider ring. And pretty much it's Windows, balls to bone through the whole thing. It's Windows, or it's Windows 10, except there seems to be one glaring exception. And that being, it cannot run Win32 apps. So it only runs Universal Windows apps, UWP. It only runs UWP apps. Now, the purpose behind this, I mean, maybe it runs leaner and meaner, maybe it's more secure, and it certainly would be more secure because UWP apps, by their very nature, function in a sandbox to where what happens to one app does not infect the entire system, which is a great way to go. I mean, that's like at the heart of, things like Cubes OS and some of the more, security and privacy minded systems out there. Okay. And Microsoft has really been leading the charge on sandboxing things and not necessarily even really telling anybody. Like Microsoft Edge is going to be a sandboxed app very soon, at least in the enterprise, and then it'll probably trickle down to consumer level. But Windows 10 Cloud, yeah, I guess they're probably going to offer it for nothing, and it's going to, how can they offer it for nothing? Just like, Google Chrome doesn't really charge for manufacturers to install Chrome OS. What's the advantage here? Well, for Google, Chrome OS, of course, is getting people into Google services and then, serving them ads or whatever. For Windows, I think really the winner is going to be here is not ads. I think what's going to be effectively paying for this, because again, even if they say it's zero cost or that the manufacturers don't have to pay anything and it doesn't, trickle down to you, as to where computers usually add on $100 in price just to have a Windows license on it. I think what's going to happen is I think they just want the metrics to see so many people using UWP, and you're going to see some really, really, lower end computers running this. And, for me, I get it. It's fine. They can do it. Yes, it's going to be a more secure system. It'll be nice to have an alternative to Chromebooks that obviously isn't Google, even though you could put Chromium OS, I suppose, on certain ones. But there's a couple of losers here. One is that now this year we know that Chromebooks every Chromebook coming out in 2017 is supposed to be able to run Android apps. Okay. So that's a huge deal. Now, how can Windows compete with that? Well, Windows has the largest software library in the world because of Win32 apps that have been around for decades. But when you release a computer that doesn't run Win32 apps, well, what the fuck? So I think the only thing I can imagine is that Microsoft is just looking to see higher usage of UWP apps. Of course, they came out with Project Centennial. Microsoft did this earlier in 2016, where the Centennial or Project Centennial was allowing you to take a Win32 app and almost instantly convert it with very little work involved, converting it into a UWP app. So maybe this is a way to push people into, or push companies into making more UWP apps, even though the leaks that I've seen of Windows 10 Cloud, they couldn't run the Centennial-based UWP apps. So what the fuck? I mean, again, it's in beta. So, that's totally understandable. But yeah, this is, I don't know where this is going to be a big deal. I mean, it to some degree, it's probably related to, well, I mean, that's the funny thing. Like, why do this? They just cracked the nut, a couple months ago of how can we get Win32 apps to run on ARM processors? They just solved that. And now they're releasing Windows 10 Cloud that doesn't run Win32 apps. That seems like just some of that classic Microsoft craziness, even though Microsoft is a very new company. They're a very different company than they were 3-4 years ago, and of decades past. It does seem like those odd ideas that Microsoft was always kind of just laying out there, and then they end up having to support forever, and it screws them over. Whatever. Anyway. Yeah, Windows 10 Cloud, it's going to be a thing. There's probably going to be cheap computers out there. Always keep in mind that really there's no such thing as a $200 computer. The cheapest any computer really should cost is like $600. I'm sorry, that's not really capitalism that allows computers to be $200. It's $400 worth of subsidized ad tech, ad software that becomes exploitable, becomes a security exploit that gets baked into these machines, however it ends up shaping up. Yeah, don't trust the $200 computers. just don't. Even the ones that are Chromebooks. Well, some of those are made that cheap. Like, they're really that cheap, especially some of the original Chromebooks. Holy shit. I mean, they'll fall apart on you in pretty short order. But whatever. Let's get into the main news for this week, because we've got a doozy of a story. And like I said, we're going to delve into the realm of politics here. Boy. And, don't hold me as far as the, how to put this, on the technology details, hold my feet to the fire. On some of the other stuff, don't hold me too hard on these, because and it's actually going to speak to what I really want to talk about and kind of the what needs to be done about all this. So since January 20th, things have been kind of crazy in the United States of America. Of course, Trump was inaugurated and is now the president of the United States. It's absolutely official. Of all things, I think a lot of people were still thinking, oh, well, on the 19th, don't worry, Obama's going to declare martial law or something. And folks, look, people have been saying that shit to me since I was a kid. I knew that wasn't going to happen at all. So anyway, there have been a lot of marches, a lot of, there has been what has been known as the hashtag Muslim ban, where, some 7 countries have, were put effectively on a list, and anybody coming into this country from those countries was being held at, various airports perhaps, and other things. And then there's the whole green card situation, and all this is changing by the minute. I mean, supposedly now, like just this morning I saw, and that would be Saturday, February 4th. I saw that, oh no, people with visas can get in now, because before people with work visas couldn't even get in. Then they had to, pull back on, could people with green cards come in? I mean, and then some, I mean, there's so much going on with all this, with a lot of these protests and people getting, very hot and bothered about, really, in my opinion, crazy legislation that either started with past presidents like Obama or Bush, or even before then, or that is relatively new, or at least had been empowered due to past presidents, to Donald Trump. Please do not email me with the argument that, oh, no, Obama set this up. Trump's just, kind of, maybe he's using it, but blame Obama. Look, I know. Okay. Holy shit. I get so sick of seeing that fucking argument. Is what's happening bad or not? Yep. It's bad. Okay. Well, is people's quote unquote right to travel being infringed upon? Yep. Okay. There. It's bad. Whoever did it, they did it. Wow. I'm in awe at the absolute lack of empathy, just because you want to, rub shit in, somebody's face about the fact, oh no, it wasn't Trump, you fucking leftist, or some shit. Oh, give me a break. Not that anybody's giving me that, because I've been careful. And it really speaks to the heart of, again, of what I want to talk about here. So a lot of crazy stuff going on every single day. It seems like the, whatever news organization, CNN, whoever, is pushing shit out. Like there doesn't seem to be, I mean, it just seems like there's crazy story after crazy story after crazy story. And frankly, in the social media circles, shall I say, or just in the social circles that I run in, I mean, like the rampant panic, the rampant lack of taking a breath, just the very reactionary. I don't know what I don't think that reactionaryism is a word. Of course it isn't. But the incredibly reactionary nature of so much what's happening on the web as a whole is very disconcerting to me. So now I want to make something super clear here before I'm going to play some audio here for a second. And I want to make this point super clear before somebody turns this off. Look, in my opinion, Donald Trump is a horrendous human being. Anybody that wants to run for president, in my opinion, like I have very severe concerns over. Okay. But Trump in particular, I think is a very horrendous human being. He is, there are policies that he is either going to enact or is enacting, and regardless of what is the foundation that he is able to do that from, he doesn't have to use that foundation to do what he's doing, right? He doesn't have to use that political foundation created by put in place by his predecessors, right? Just a terrible human being. Every president, just fuck them all. Okay, I'm an anarchist. Like I don't understand the mind that even remotely wants to be a politician for any reason, even self-defense. That's just crazy to want responsibility over other people, or, to even like think you can pretend to represent somebody else is just nuts. Or if you think you're just doing it for yourself, what? what, you're willing to use the force of the gun on everybody else by you passing legislation or whatever else, even if you go in there as a doctor, no. And like, you're saying, no, I don't pass that. Don't pass that. Don't pass that. Don't pass that. You're still really like forcing your will onto other people in a very real sense, whether it's yes or no, when you're sitting in the halls of politics, the dens of iniquity. So I don't get that at all. So don't think that in any way, shape, or form I'm defending any politician, be it Obama, be it Trump, left, right, whatever. I won't defend any single goddamned one of them. Not one. So, but I'm going to play this audio here quick, and then I want to I have a story that I want to get into, and because what I want to talk about here is doing something about everybody being so goddamn reactionary. That really has to stop. So, all right, let's get to the audio. And this audio is just real quick. This audio is from a couple days ago, and it is President Donald Trump, and during a press conference here.
Last month we celebrated the life of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., whose incredible example is unique in American history. You read all about Dr. Martin Luther King a week ago when somebody said I took the statue out of my office, and it turned out that was fake news. Fake news. The statue is cherished. It's one of the favorite things and we have some good ones. We have Lincoln, and we have Jefferson, and we have Dr. Martin Luther King, and we have other, but they said the statue, the bust of Dr. Martin Luther King was taken out of the office, and it was never even touched. So I think it was a disgrace. But folks at the table, in almost all cases, have been great friends and supporters. And Darryl, I met Darryl when he was defending me on television. And the people that were on the other side of the argument didn't have a chance, right? That's right. And Paris has done an amazing job in a very hostile CNN community. He's all by himself. And he'll have 7 people in Paris, and I'll take Paris over the 7. But I don't watch CNN, so I don't get to see as much as I don't like watching fake news.
Wow. Yeah, so that definitely plays into a subject that we hadn't really touched on in the past in Sovereign Tech, which is this idea of fake news. Also, it touches on the idea of alternative facts, which is ironic because here's, Donald Trump talking about, fake news being a problem, yet when his own team uses the concept of alternative facts, we're saying, that like so many people were apparently at his inauguration, but then you find out that they actually weren't, but his press secretary, lied about it, but then when confronted said, oh, no, I didn't lie. I was just presented with alternative facts. What the fuck? Okay. There is an objective reality, folks. And there aren't alternative facts. There are objective facts. And anyway, so not to get in so much into the alternative facts thing. But the fake news thing is something that has been around a bit. The point I want to start getting into with this is that, Trump was talking about how there was a story going around. It went around very quickly that, he had removed the bust or the statue of Martin Luther King from the White House or whatever, and ended up being, not true at all. I saw this story get shared around a ton, just again, in my own circles, people that generally, I think are, I would generally think would be a cut above. But it seems like a lot of people are falling into this very reactionary stance. Now, I want to read another story to you. Okay, so there's one example, one that was publicly admitted to. Here's one that I did a breakdown of recently on social media. And it's from the Independent, and the date on it is January 29th, so just a few days ago, 2017. And it's Donald Trump Muslim immigration ban, U.S. Border Patrol, quote, checking people's Facebook for political views, end quote. Refugees and green card holders detained and interrogated despite legal right to come to the U.S. Now, again, this is from January 29th. In the past few days, a lot of changes have happened as far as that, that bit of order or regulation, goes. So, keep that in perspective, but the points in the story and the points I want to make are still the same. So I'm going to read a little bit here. U.S. border agents are checking people's Facebook pages for their political views before allowing them into the country. An immigration lawyer has claimed. All right, let's stop for a second. Most people, right there in the first paragraph, most people are going to share this story, and most people are just going to see the headline and say, holy shit, they're checking our, they're checking our Facebook. We're all fucked. We're screwed. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, now, here, right in the first paragraph, an immigration lawyer has claimed. It's a claim. Now, kudos to the Independent, at least, for saying that it's just a claim and that they didn't go through, like they hadn't gone through the rigorous process of necessarily verifying this. Not to say that you don't want to take that claim seriously, but you also want to look into it for yourself when it is just a claim and it's something, frankly, this serious. Read on with the story here. Quote, Houston-based lawyer Mana Yagani said several green card holders who have the right to live and work in the U.S. were detained by border agents at American airports hours after President Donald Trump signed an executive order banning immigration from 7 countries in the Middle East and Africa. The ban affects travelers with passports from Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen, and also extends to green card holders who are granted authorization to live and work in the United States, according to a Department of Homeland Security spokesman. Ms. Yagani, who works with the American Immigration Lawyers Association, that's ALIA, said she and her fellow lawyers had worked through the night fielding calls from people with legitimate visa being detained before entering the U.S. or ordered back on flights to the Muslim-majority countries on the list. All right, stopping here for a second. So this is like the bit of particulars that a lot of people who, just seem to want to piss off somebody, instead of admit that, wow, this is crazy legislation no matter how you slice it. This is the splitting of hairs they like to do, is that, well, they're not really banning Muslims. It's just, yeah, sure, the countries that they're banning from are, have a large Muslim population, but they're not really banning Muslims. They're just banning anybody coming from these countries. Sure, that's true. But then, of course, the question comes up, why? Why those countries? Anyway, that's not the point that I want to talk about here. But that is important too. I mean, that splitting of hairs is important, and that's kind of what we're getting into, is a lot of splitting of hairs here. But let's read on with the story. In one alleged incident, a Sudanese PhD student at Stanford University in California, who has lived in the U.S. for 22 years, was held for 5 hours in New York, and in another, a dual Iranian-Canadian citizen was not allowed to board a flight in Ottawa. Alia said border agents were checking the social media accounts of those detained and were interrogating them about their political beliefs before allowing them into the U.S. She said, quote, "These are the people that are coming in legally. They have jobs here and they have vehicles here. Just because Trump signed something at 6 p.m. yesterday, things are coming to a crashing halt. It's scary." Now, there's more with this story, but frankly, we can stop right here. Okay, and start breaking this down. Now, there is a link, and of course, the link for this is in the show notes. Okay, there is a link at this point in the story, and this is coming from the Independent, which isn't, as far as in the conventional terms, as far as good news sources, it's not one of the worst. I mean, it may not be, at the level of, for some people, what would be like Washington Post, New York Times, Boston Globe, things like this, right? But, it's not terrible. It's not just somebody's blog. Right. So they have a link here for where it says, Alia said border agents were, and here's where the link is, checking the social media accounts of those detained. Now, you would assume that in this story from the Independent, that when that link appears, that it is going to take you to a story, or it's going to take you to the facts, more of the situation, a greater breakdown of what exactly is going on with, these present, are on the 29th, these green card holders, visa holders being detained, that are coming from these 7 countries. However, the link does not go there, but that link is the proof, is being held up on this website as the proof for, that this is actually happening, that this is a reality, that this is going down. However, the link goes to a story from July 22nd, 2016. It does not go to a story that has anything to do with, with the president detaining and, and the banning, from entering from these 7 countries into the U.S. Has nothing to do with it. In fact, it gets worse. Now, not to say where it links, what happened isn't terrible. Here's the title for the story that it actually links to, which is supposed to be about how the border patrols are checking your social media, right? That's what it's supposed to be about. So it links to a story from the Independent as well, which is fine. You link internally. Of course, most news sources do that. And it says here, this is the title for the story that links to, that's again supposed to be about the border patrols, or people about DHS, whoever, border checking, patrols checking social media accounts. And this is it. Woman reaches $475,000 settlement with border agency in illegal body search case. And when you read the story, I mean, what she went through was horrendous, and I'm glad she got some fucking damages because it was deserved. I mean, they were doing cavity checks. I mean, they did things far worse than searching your social media. But there was no mention of social media getting searched in the fucking story. Now, there's the chance that the Independent just leaked to the wrong one. And even days later now that I'm looking at this on February 4th, and again, the article was originally posted, was released on January 29th, they linked to the wrong thing. Maybe, right? But they never fixed it. And seemingly nobody cared to look deeper into the story, cared to look deeper at the evidence for this story about, social media accounts getting checked at the border, to find, okay, what's the reality here? The reality is that the evidence that happens was not being linked to by the Independent. Now, it goes even deeper, okay? Because when I saw the story, I saw some people posting it, and I understand, I get it. It's scary. Look, we are in very dangerous and scary times. It's a fact. I'll talk more about that in a second. All right. But, people were sharing it, and I was like, oh, wait a second, and I think a couple people might have even emailed the story to me, to talk about it. And I was like, wait a second, let me look into this. So the first thing I did, which I do with most of my Sovryn Tech stories, okay, and I'm going to make sure it's not just most, now it's going to be every goddamn one. When I looked into it, there was no other news organization talking about this. Does that mean it's untrue? No, not necessarily. But it does raise a lot of questions. And as soon as I found that no other news source was talking about how social media or social media accounts were being checked by border patrols, for these people that were being detained on January 29th, I mean, every red flag in my head went off. And so then I started digging deeper into the article that was posted. And that's when I find, oh shit, there's evidence that border patrols, are checking this stuff out. They don't have any evidence for that. Not the Independent doesn't have evidence for that. However, we do know that this does happen, and it did start happening under an Obama policy in 2016. So yes, this does happen. However, the evidence that it was happening on the 29th, that it's happened with this, hashtag Muslim ban, which again is, yes, I understand technically an inaccurate statement, but I think it speaks to the broader point. The evidence doesn't exist. We don't know that. We're taking people's word for it that it's happening. That doesn't mean you write it off. Because really horrendous shit is happening. Really terrible shit is happening. There's no doubt on that. Okay? I mean, and there's lots of evidence as far as, that when, what was it, the federal judge in New York said, oh, no, I'm overturning this shit. I'm ignoring, you ignore this ban by President Trump, and you let these people into the country. But then, DHS workers and whatever other workers, they ignored the judge. So, I mean, I'm not bringing all this to light to you. I'm not saying a terrible thing isn't happening or didn't happen. Absolutely. Yes, it did. However, we got to be super clear on the facts here. And the reason that we need to be super clear on the facts is because if you're going to go on social media, or if you're going to go on a podcast, or if you're going to go whatever venue you have, and if you are going to stand up for these people that are really, being aggressed, or, well, maybe aggressed might not, I mean, rights are being infringed. I think for most people, not getting an argument about rights, but for most people, that would be seen as aggression, right? But for these people that are being affected, let's put it that way, if you're going to defend them, and I applaud you for doing so, better have your fucking facts straight, because you've got so many goddamn people out there right now, Trump supporters, whoever else, that are going to zero in on the minutia. of what exactly you're saying. And if you have anything, kind of like Trump coming out and saying, oh, you thought I took down the MLK statue? Nope. Are you kidding me? I didn't do that at all. CNN reported fake news. You're going to get vilified instantaneously. Every single time, especially when it comes to this all this Trump stuff and, again, stories that are related to the political climate today, you triple check the fuck out of this shit. And you do it fast. Before you click share, do not click share. Do not make you don't have to listen to me. I'm making a recommendation. Do not make a post reacting to it until there's an old bit of wisdom in Judaism, which is where 2 or 3 witnesses agree, there's the truth. Now, there's also when there's unanimous agreement, there's a problem. But when you have the idea is that if you have a couple sources, okay, feel a little more comfortable talking about that and maybe treating it as truth. So first thing you do is when you see a story like this, do not get reactionary. Stop, go to DuckDuckGo, Bing, Google, Start Page, whatever the fuck you want to use. You go there and you see who else is reporting on this. Is there anybody else reporting on this? All right. And if there is, then check to see, wait a minute, who exactly is reporting? Because there were a ton of, when I Google searched, okay, and I went to Google, I tried them all because there was a point I was trying to make here. When I did the Google search for the story from the Independent about social media being searched on those banned from the country, a lot of other sites came up with the story. Yes. But every one of those sites, you could easily tell by the name, was just some asshat's blog post, or blog site. And they were completely parroting everything from the Independent. There was no, and pun intended, there was no other independent source for this information. None. It didn't exist. Not in any of the search engines anyway. I'm not saying it couldn't exist outside of that or that it didn't, but based upon what I was looking at and what I would be comfortable, me as a tech journalist, me as a fucking human being, saying to people, hey, you should be, I'm concerned about you, so you should be concerned about this, blah, blah, blah. Wasn't there. It wasn't there. Another story that came out was about the Uber strike. This is another one where, and this is going to speak to the second point that you want to do. So the first thing is you want to look, okay, who else is reporting on this? And it, depends on who is, right? And if anyone else is. And if it's only one source, be careful, take it with a grain of salt and start looking at what exactly they're linking to in their stories, because like we said, and so maybe that should be the second thing. Second thing is that if you don't see anybody else looking at it, or even if you do, look at the sources, look at what's being sourced in the, in the online article itself to see if it's even relevant to what exactly is being reported. Because in the case of the story from the Independent, no, it was not. It had nothing to do with social media. It had to do with far worse, it had to do with cavity searches, like I said, but it was not what they linked to specifically as referencing that there were social media searches going on was not relative. It had nothing to do with social media. I mean, maybe social media searches happened to that woman who who ended up getting like $500,000. Good for you. But that wasn't part of the story. Now, another story, again, like I said, was the Uber strike in New York. And a lot of people were going nuts about this, and because what happened is, and you ended up with another hashtag, what happened is that, there was a strike for like an hour or something, and then Uber raised the prices. They made a change, network side on the app to that effectively the claim was that it forced the Uber strikers in New York to get back to work. And the claim was that Uber ended the strike. And so there was hashtag delete Uber. It was this, big deal on all of social media. Come to find out, the strike ended an hour before Uber did anything, before Uber made any network side changes whatsoever. But was your social media flooded with people saying delete Uber and that Uber did some heinous thing? Look, there doesn't have to be a banning of people getting into this country for me to tell you to delete Uber. Uber does plenty of bad shit. Okay. God mode, support, funding, Operation Urban Shield. There's a laundry list of reasons to fucking hate Uber. But guess what? This wasn't one of them, but everybody was buying into it being fucking reactionary, either sharing the story or doing goddamn commentary and getting it all out there. And then by the end of the night, every one of those people looked like asses because they didn't have all the facts, because they were being too reactionary. And look, I know I can kind of, maybe this is what you're thinking, okay? But I know I have a smart audience, so maybe you're not. But what if it's something really deadly, really serious? You got to act now. You can't wait. You're just sharing shit on social media. You're not running out there with riot gear ready, to try and rescue, some foreigners or something, right? You're just sharing it on social media. You can wait. So that's my third point in all this. Let's consider this maybe internet self-defense, not like intellectual self-defense, but maybe internet self-defense. How about that? Maybe I'll do a whole course on it. Breathe. Let the story sit. I didn't post about that story from the Independent that we talked about here. I didn't post about that until 10 hours after the story because I wanted to wait. Okay, is there the chance that other people will report on this? Is there the chance that the Independent will change what they had to say? And they haven't changed a lick. The story's still up there running, same as it was on the 29th. Let this stuff settle, okay? Get the facts first. Make sure you know exactly what's going on. I mean, and some news organizations will actually kind of be all right about this, to where they will say the last words of a story, of a breaking story, they'll say, we're waiting for comment from the company. You as somebody, perhaps an activist, whatever, you wait for that fucking comment, in my opinion, before you share this stuff. Because that comment could change everything. I mean, with the delete Uber, everybody just looked ridiculous in that. Now, again, yes, delete Uber. I support that action. Okay. But not for this reason. Or, I mean, whatever. Delete everything for this reason, but you know what I mean? We got to be, look, I get it. I mean, there's this narrative out there now that there's the resistance. Like now it's like a thing. I mean, people used to joke, and kind of quote John Connor and say, you're part of the resistance and all this shit. Like now there's really seems to be sort of this, very decentralized, body, that being, known as the resistance, and they're doing things. Some people are violent. Other people are not violent. Thankfully. I do not support violence. Whatever. However it's taking shape, a lot of different people. I mean, when you're talking about something that ethereal, okay, there's not one set of rules or one set of action, one sets of action or something. I mean, like it could be a bunch of different shit. But there is this thing called the resistance. Frankly, in many ways, I consider myself a part of it. I do not support violent action. I do not support pepper spraying people. I do not support, just people. I mean, if you're getting attacked, that obviously, or somebody's trying to steal something from you, very different story, right? Okay. I'm not supporting any of that. I'm just saying, okay, that as far as like getting information out and being against this administration and any administration that has ever existed on the planet Earth, oh yeah, I'm a part of the resistance. And I understand a lot of my listeners, they've emailed me and said, like, what do you think about this? I'm considering myself part of that. Go ahead. But if you're going to be a part of this, if you're going to be against the alt-right, which I totally support being against the fucking alt-right, that's one of the, most terrible things. I mean, just unbelievable, that's out there. And there's other political movements too that I don't agree with. Oh, well, I don't agree with any political movement, but I hope you get my gist. You have your facts straight. You do not be reactionary. I mean, if you're of the opinion, and there's a lot of people that are of this opinion, to where like a lot of this stuff is very much, it's controlled opposition, or, everybody's being puppeteered and all this stuff. The way to not be puppeteered, the way to not be controlled, all right, through the media and whatever else is going on out there, is to not be reactionary, to breathe, to take a second, to do the research, to look just a little bit deeper. You don't have to go far. I didn't have to go far to find out that this was, wait a second, this may be happening, but we don't know that it's happening here. And so you don't go alarming everybody about it. You don't have to search deep. So I hope that kind of those at least 3 rules that you want to go forward with. Okay. Where look for other sources, right? Check the sources within the article itself and give it time. Okay. Let the turkey fucking rest before you go out there and start saying, oh my God, everybody's dying. However you end up doing that. I mean, I'm all about, getting hysterical. I do it every week, almost every week, it seems. Okay. But breathe, please get the facts straight. So that way, when, everybody starts, jumping down your throat for warning people or for, informing people or whatever, you have reality on your side and you can make them look like asses. Okay. Now, all of that said, yes, it is true, and we've talked about this before on Sovryn Tech. It is true that border patrols, border guards, are checking social media accounts, for like your political persuasion. And again, this started back in at least 2016. The framework to allow for that has been around for almost a decade, about as long as there's been social media. Okay. So that's a reality. So what do we do about that? Why don't we talk about that for a second here? Okay. And I put a link in the show notes, okay, for our main story. There's 2 links. One is to the independent story. The other is a link from itsupportguides.com, which tells you how to delete all of your Facebook posts. Doesn't delete your account. It deletes all of your Facebook posts. You have to have Firefox installed. Yay, Mozilla. Okay. And you use, I think it's Grease Monkey. You use Grease Monkey for the add-on. And then there's a script that you can put into that, which you can be very careful about what script you're using. And again, it's all in the story, and you can delete all of your Facebook posts. So now what exactly we know, the reality around how border patrols are looking at your social media, okay, that needs to be discussed, because what exactly is happening here? Are they asking you for your password to get into your social media and look at it? Not exactly. Okay. Not exactly. What's happening is that they ask you for your username. They ask you for your social media information. Then generally what it seems is they're going over to their own computer and they will look you up and they'll look at your posts and see, frankly, whether or not you're a troublemaker. And certainly I respect and hope you are, but depending on what they see, they may not let you in. And of course, the U.S. isn't the only country that's doing this. Turkey does this. A bunch of countries around the world engage in this sort of thing. So there's 2 things to do here. I mean, one is that you can not post anything openly on Facebook or whatever, or at least be careful that, or what you're posting, maybe just have it be a bit more benign or something. That's one, path to doing this, because this is probably, look, it probably did happen on the 29th. I'm just saying that the evidence that it did is non-existent, or at least it was non-existent on the 29th when everybody was talking about it. I don't have any reason to doubt necessarily that it happened, but I do have reason to make sure that when I talk about it and say it happened, that I know it fucking happened, right? Okay. So, you could delete all of your posts if you want, and they check Twitter too. It's not just Facebook. And you could delete everything and then they have nothing to look at. Okay. And for most people now, honestly, Facebook has become groups and Messenger anyway. Like a lot of people, what I've come to realize in the past year is that, really where the action is on Facebook, it's in groups. Okay. So that's something else you want to pay attention to. Are the groups you're in? What are the names of those groups? Because they should be able to see what groups you're a part of. Even though they're not accessing, like they don't have your password, they're not actually going into your account. They're just looking at it like anybody else can. Theoretically, that's how it's working. So, be careful about the groups. But here's the thing is that now if we're talking about border patrols, and this is particularly true, at at a literal border, say if you're driving from Mexico to, not necessarily on a plane, if you're driving a car from like Mexico to the US or even Canada to the US, and oh yes, they do this in Canada, they will ask to see your phone, and they will ask you to unlock your phone. And to see the pictures that are on your phone and all this stuff, right? Okay. Now, when they do that, there is the potential that they could. So let's say you did it right, or, quote unquote, right. Let's say you deleted all of your Facebook posts. You deleted all your tweets. Okay. They're not going to find any shit about that. Right. But if they have your phone, they could probably easily, get, if they're searching things on your phone, looking at pictures or whatever, they're going to see what's happening on Facebook Messenger, or perhaps you have the Facebook Groups app on your phone and they're going to see that, or the direct messages, on Twitter, which is also very popular. So how do you solve this? Well, I think the way to solve that is, and there's various software that allows for this. Okay. Sometimes even like the skins that say like a company like Asus or Samsung or others, that they put on their phones for Android, they will give you the option to create a lock code for every app on your phone. And you could make it a different one for every one. Pain in the ass? Absolutely. But if we're talking about security and if shit's that serious, you might want to consider it. Okay. So on your phone, you're going to want to lock down those particular apps if they are specifically, and we know they are, looking for, what's happening on Facebook, what's happening on Twitter, other social media, whatever that happens to be, is that you could lock those down. So you want to, you want to take, I think that's a good step to do either way. Yes, it sucks. Yes, it makes it a pain, to constantly be accessing it. But if you're going to cross the border, at least just turn it on when you're going over the border and then turn it back off. Sophos, I think they make apps that do this sort of thing too. Sophos security company. There's lots of, look into how to do that. And I would lock up Messenger. And if you have the Groups app or, even the Facebook app or whatever, I would lock that shit up. Behind a whatever. If you can do a 6-digit code, great. But if it's just a 4-digit code, go ahead. Can they compel you to hand that over? Well, that's where there's a lot of debate and wiggle room, but we survive in the debates and wiggle room. Okay. We survive in the cracks. We're shadow runners. Woo. But you know what I mean? So that's, those are the steps that I would take. As far as that goes, because this is genuinely happening. Okay. Again, we don't know to what degree, if at all, it was happening on January 29th due to this, this flight ban. Okay. But it does happen. So it's something you want to prepare for. It's something you want to keep in mind, perhaps. I know I have a lot of listeners that are very serious activists and I applaud you. Okay. But protect yourself out there, because we are in very, very interesting times as far as this goes. So there we go. Lock up your social media, tighten that shit up. All right. And tighten up what you're posting on social media. Make sure you know what you're posting is not just some reactionary shit. Look into these stories as best you can. Maybe after you do your due diligence, it'll still be wrong. It'll still end up being fake. But at least you can say, no, well, I did my due diligence. All right. I went at this like a journalist. It's funny. That might be one of the, not that I don't want to control information or censor information by any means, but kind of everybody's become a journalist, but they don't act with the same journalistic integrity and rigor. I'm trying to think of like the 3 rules of journalism. There was like, who's paying for it? Or who wrote it? Why did they write it? Who's paying for it? Those are kind of the 3 big rules of journalism that you would learn in college. Okay. Not saying college is a good thing, but most people on social media, they don't realize that's, they're being held they can be held to that scrutiny when they post something. So just be more conscious. Think about all this stuff. Anyway, that's enough. I just wanted to get that out there. Please stop being reactionary. Think this stuff through. Trump does terrible shit. Obama's done terrible shit. They're politicians. They've all done terrible shit. Okay. But just make sure you know where it comes from, because especially all those people that, they were saying, oh, it wasn't Trump. It was actually Obama that started it. In the case of checking social media, they were absolutely right. And worse, there's no evidence that Trump enacted that, not that Trump enacted it, but that it was happening on that day. So check your stories, check your sources. Be sure what you're talking about when you're out there doing your activism, or you're out there, trying to educate people, which is such an important thing. be sure, be conscious, pay attention. I'll be right back with more Sovryn Tech. Hey, you know, we're talking about securing things, baby. One of the best things you can secure is your wealth. And one of the best ways to do that, bar none, is, well, actually, have bars. Not bar none. You want bars. Bars of gold and silver, baby. Woo! Get them from Roberts and Roberts Brokerage. This is a company that gets it. They understand. They certainly understand the political climate. I guarantee you that. Okay. They are one of the best out there. Get your hands, gold and silver, platinum, palladium, coins, however you want to do it, whatever you want. They'll even buy from you if you want to go that direction. But if you want to buy from them, you can use Bitcoin. How about that action? Real money, baby. I mean, it's all, gold, silver, Bitcoin. I mean, I hold them in all very high regard. Okay. So you can buy with Bitcoin. It's a Bitcoin preferred business. Let them know the Golden Stallion sent you. Believe me, they're going to know who you're talking about. Woo! And I cannot thank them enough for supporting Sovryn Tech. Just go to gold.zog.ninja. It's Roberts and Roberts Brokerage. Gold.zog.ninja. And man, secure everything. Woo! Back with some Sovryn Tech, baby. I love using that little Batman theme. Don't worry. If you're wondering about the intros, I said they'd come out this week, and I apologize. Various things, came up and whatever. You're going to get the new segment intros that I do, and they're going to be sexy. Don't worry. But the new segment intros, these are going to kind of be a very special limited run. So it kind of works, that the time frame in which they're going to play. So wait for those. Don't worry, they're coming. I actually have a very special episode planned for next week. We'll see how that goes. But segment intros will be on the way. The story, the Sovryn universe, as some Sovryn Tech listeners have dubbed it, it will absolutely continue on. And it'll continue on forever if I have my way, baby. Especially, we keep talking about this present political climate. Woo! I think the level of debauchery and degeneracy that I like to put on display on this show is more needed than ever. And so I am happy to put it on display. Ooh, all right. Now, why don't we get away from, not to say it's any less serious a subject, but let's shake things up. And this is actually a little bit of, frankly, it's Sovryn Tech vindication, which I've gotten quite a bit of that in the past week. In fact, I'm going to take a moment, if you don't mind. I want to read this. This is from, and I have to thank one of the syndicates, actually, of this show, LRN, Ian Freeman, who's the head of it. He brought this to my attention, and it is from a Sovryn Tech listener, great person, who's actually sent other emails that have been very well thought out, and I really appreciate them. But this is from the Shire Society forums. Now, if you don't know what the Shire Society is, it's at shiresociety.com. Shire as in kind of like Lord of the Rings, but it's really a reference to New Hampshire, which is where I live. And it's also the home of what is known as the Free State Project. Now, the Free State Project is certainly a political movement. You can go to freestateproject.org if you want to find out more about that, but it's the idea of, moving 20,000 people at least into a geographic area and trying to create, a more liberty-minded, not paradise, but a more liberty-minded area, shall we say. And within that, though, there's also the Shire Society, which I kind of appreciate in that it's really more about because not necessarily a Free State Project, but there's a lot of people within the Free State Project that are all about, and secession is a huge conversation right now, kind of in the national consciousness, like the Cal exit, right? California is looking to leave the U.S. New Hampshire has been looking to do that for a long time. And New Hampshire's not the only one either, but certainly, they're like state of Jefferson, right? But New Hampshire's been looking to do that, and Shire Society, and I hope I'm not misrepresenting them in any way, but what I, kind of know of it and remember is that it was all about secession right down to the individual. You are removing yourself, from the rules and all the crap of society and the U.S. government and all that stuff. Maybe not society so much. Maybe not. People don't think that way, but that's how I think. But I like that message of, yep, I am seceding all the way down to the individual, all the way down to me. I am not a part of your bullshit. Woo! I'm on board with that message. Anyway, so on the forums, which are still, pretty active, which is great because again, that this is getting completely away from social media. in a very real sense. This is an awesome thing to do, is to, in fact, I've had a term for it for a while called rewilding the web, to where forums become a thing again. And they kind of are a thing again, depending on what niche you're looking at, especially in the cryptocurrency space, which this actually has to do with. So I just want to say a huge thank you to the listener that put this out there on the Shire forums. So here it is. It says, quote, "Thanks to listening to Sovryn Tech, I've made some good moves on other cryptocurrencies. I had invested in Ethereum and Scenario, both of which we've talked about many times on Sovryn Tech, reading on, before he," that being me, the Golden Stallion, "discussed the uselessness of both." Woo! "So I got my money out before losing any value." Now, I'm not sure when exactly this person's there's more here. I'm not sure when this person's timetable was, but if he did it within the past few months, which is in the time frame where I've certainly talked about Scenario and been talking about Ethereum for some time, I imagine he did do very well for himself in that he didn't lose any value. Reading on here, "I may have bought Steem, Steem, if it weren't for his episodes on it," which Steem now, very quickly, and because the listener brought it up, I did not. I said I wouldn't talk about it anymore, but it's getting brought up here, has significantly devalued. I mean, it is just that if there's a sinking ship, the Titanic has nothing on what Steem, or, the Titanic has nothing on what Steem is doing. I mean, it is tanking like there's no tomorrow. If it weren't for his episodes on it. So anyway, so he did well in not getting involved in Steem, is his claim. I also invested in MadeSafe coin on his praise, which has increased in value by 80% since I bought it. If he's right on Zcash, is Brian Sovryn the Warren Buffett of the crypto world? Ooh, all right, first things first. Thank you. I am so honored, an honor I don't deserve. Okay. I get the claim and I really appreciate that. I am so glad that a Sovryn Tech listener was able to take action on things I've talked about in this show and that they've done well for themselves because of it. That just talk about vindication. I'm not even getting into our to our HackSec story this week yet, but this is vindication. Thank you so much. It really makes me feel so good for doing this show, to know that somebody got real value out of it. That's phenomenal. So yeah, we'll see how Zcash does. Looks like Zcash might be finally, kind of leveling off a bit for now. It doesn't mean it's not going to go back up in the future. But again, I always say that, I'm not a financier and this show is not necessarily financial advice, but I'm glad that people have taken what's been talked about, even when it's more in the abstract and not necessarily so much about investing into these various cryptocurrencies, but just taking what's in the abstract and said, oh, no, I recognize this. Okay, I'm going to take action on that, with my own holdings. Phenomenal. I am, you Sovryn Tech listener that wrote this up in the Shire Society forums, you're the real brilliance, really. So thank you. But that was so kind to say that the Warren Buffett of the crypto world. How about that? Anyway, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So anyway, let's get into this week's HackSec story. We got a doozy here. And it's from Ars Technica. And there is a point that is really interesting that I want to get to. So the story goes, it might be time, this is the headline, it might be time to stop using antivirus. Update your software and OS regularly instead. Practice skeptical computing. Now, the headline alone kind of says the story. It's by Sebastian Anthony, by the way, and it's from January 27th, 2017, HE, which is just 2017. And the thing is that I've been saying this for quite some time. The last antivirus that I recommended was probably like 4 years ago, and I remember somebody asking into Sovryn Tech about it, and I said, yeah, use ESET, because it has like that gaming mode. But the problem with the antivirus was that, it just really bogs down your machine. It's such a mess. Norton has been terrible forever, blah, blah, blah. But really it's become just a more, due to like with Windows, it's become just more practical to not use one. It's made more sense to not use one at all, because Microsoft has gotten into, the antivirus game, with Windows Defender and all that. So anyway, it's vindicating to hear big time, or not big time, but to hear perhaps people a little more professional, come out and say, no, don't use an antivirus. Don't do it. So let's read a bit of the story here, because there's actually some really interesting things about this, about just how harmful, and I just, years ago, I just said, well, it's a pain in the ass because it fucks with your gaming. But it actually is much worse than what antivirus has done to the entire computing world, really, the entire personal computing revolution, really. So let's read a bit here. Former Firefox developer Robert O'Callaghan, now a free agent and safe from the PR tentacles of his corporate overlord, that's an interesting perspective on Mozilla, says that antivirus software is terrible. Antivirus vendors are terrible, and that you should uninstall your antivirus software immediately unless you use Microsoft's Windows Defender, which is apparently okay, which is exactly what I've been saying now for years on Sovryn Tech. Reading on, a couple of months back, Justin Shu, Google Chrome's security chief and indeed one of the world's top InfoSec bods, said that antivirus software is, quote, my single biggest impediment to shipping a secure browser, end quote. Ooh. Further down the thread, he explains that meddling AV, as an antivirus, AV software delayed Win32 Flash sandboxing, quote, for over a year, end quote, and that further sandboxing efforts are still on hold due to AV. The man-in-the-middle nature of antivirus also causes a stream of TLS errors, says Shu, which in turn breaks down some elements of HTTPS. These are just two recent instances of browser makers being increasingly upset with antivirus software. Back in 2012, Nicholas Nethercote, another Mozillan working on Firefox's MemShrink project, said that, quote, McAfee is killing us, end quote. In that case, Nethercote was trying to reduce the memory footprint of Firefox, a damn fine thing to do, Stallion breaking in, reading on, and found that gnarly browser add-ons like McAfee were consuming a huge amount of memory, amongst other things. If you venture off-piste into the browser mailing list, anti-antivirus sentiment has bubbled away just below the surface for a very long time. The problem, from the perspective of the browser makers, is that antivirus software is incredibly invasive. Antivirus, in an attempt to catch viruses before they can infect your system, forcibly hooks itself into other pieces of software on your computer, such as your browser, word processor, or even the OS kernel. O'Callaghan gives one particularly egregious example. Quote, back when we first made sure ASLR was working for Firefox on Windows, many AV vendors broke it by injecting their own ASLR-disabled DLLs into our processes. ASLR, or Address Space Layout Randomization, is one of the better protections against butter overflow exploits. So now, I could break into the technicals of what all that means, but the bottom line being is that the security features that browsers themselves, Chrome, Firefox, whoever, were trying to bake in to keep, various aspects of you traversing the web, leaking into your OS and wreaking havoc, was actually, was weakened, was delayed by antivirus software itself, by security software itself. How ironic. That's kind of like the main point here that I think is just so just so mind-blowing, is that antivirus software has done more to hurt security than it's done to help. Now, there's some, granted, this isn't, you don't want to make so much of a blanket statement like that. Like, antivirus companies were the ones that found out about things like Stuxnet, right? Or that kind of got the hints at this sort of thing. Kaspersky has found out about a whole bunch of different things, kind of like the firmware problems in hard drives, to where, seemingly on a more traditional hard drive, anything could be read on it at any given time just by rewriting this firmware that you really can't do anything about. So there's something to be said for security researchers finding out some really great stuff, and this software finding out some of this stuff. But then, we can read on because they give a lot more reasons as to why you want to get completely away from using an antivirus, on Windows or whatever. But, then make software, not antivirus software, but just make lightweight software that is keeping an eye on a lot of these different processes. You can say that's what antivirus software does. Oh, no. No, antivirus software has just, it's gotten ridiculous, as far as the amount of things that it tries to do. That's why it slows down machines. That's why I haven't recommended Norton 360 in over a decade. There's just it does so much more than that. I think there are very lightweight solutions to still achieve the positive aspects of what antivirus companies have done for the, for the PC community, shall we say. and maybe even still make money through that. But really, the solution is kind of here in that, and we've talked about this even recently on Sovryn Tech, that Microsoft, because Kaspersky, remember just recently, Eugene Kaspersky, the guy, who created Kaspersky, he did that big talk where he said, he's like, oh, you're going to have a monoculture of security software because Microsoft is making it harder for us to develop security software. And they're claiming that they're doing it right, but then you have to trust Microsoft, blah, blah, blah. Well, and again, my response to that was, look, they made the OS and you don't have complete access to that OS. Only they do. They really are. I'm not saying it's the right thing. I mean, the right thing is to do it Linux way. Okay. Open source everything. But, based upon, I don't want to say it's pragmatic, but based upon, the world that we live in with Microsoft Windows, the best people to handle antivirus, to handle security on Windows is Microsoft themselves. That's just true. And it's equally true for Mac OS. Who should handle security? Well, fucking let Apple handle security. And and they're on steroids to where, they control the hardware and the software. So, they can have a much more secure system. So, and of course now, Microsoft's getting into that whole game as well. Let me read a little bit more here. Furthermore, because of the aforementioned knotweed-style rhizomes of antivirus programs, the AV software itself presents a very large attack surface. As in, without AV installed, a hacker might have to find a vulnerability in the browser or operating system. But if there's AV present, the hacker can also look for a vulnerability there. This wouldn't necessarily be a problem if AV makers made secure software, but for the most part, they don't, of all ironies. And then it says in parentheses, except for Windows Defender, because Microsoft is, quote unquote, generally competent, according to O'Callaghan. That's a very interesting statement. So the point being here, and this speaks to another principle that we lay out on Sovryn Tech a lot, is that you want to practice software minimalism and account minimalism as well, meaning have as few accounts and as little software as possible on any of your devices, computers, whatever. Okay. And honestly, not having an AV software on there is part of software minimalism, saying, okay, well, Microsoft is already, they're running Windows Defender. So there, I'll run with that. And instead of giving another piece of software that a potential hacker / cracker could exploit, that being the AV software. And it's ironic that they're not that good at it. And I think part of that, it's not that these companies aren't necessarily good at security. I think it's more that to try and keep people buying the security software, they keep adding in more features, and they really just kind of like, it's very pockmarked. They just kind of toss all these features in, and they don't really have them interact very well with each other. So anyway, read a little bit more here. Back in June last year, Google's Project Zero found 25 high-severity bugs in Symantec / Norton security products. Woohoo! Quote, these vulnerabilities are as bad as it gets, end quote, said Travis Ormandy, a Project Zero researcher. Quote, they don't require any user interaction. They affect the default configuration, and the software runs at the highest privilege levels possible. In certain cases on Windows, vulnerable code is even loaded into the kernel, resulting in remote kernel memory corruption, end quote. Over the past 5 years, Ormandy has found similar vulnerabilities in security software from Kaspersky, McAfee, ESET, Komodo, Trend Micro, and others. All this isn't to say that you or your parents shouldn't use antivirus software, but you should certainly be aware that using antivirus software doesn't necessarily make your computer any more secure. In some cases, AV might make your computers less secure and cause a deleterious effect on system performance. And if you believe the browser makers, the continuing popularity of AV software might have a gnarly knock-on effect on other developers too. So essentially saying, stellium breaking in, that AV software is holding up the rest of the computer industry in a way that is completely unnecessary. As to where, if you, and this is kind of the point that it gets into later on, if you just start to, integrate best practices with your computer. I mean, and I work with companies, I work with individuals. I work with clients that this is what I do. I have Sovryn Tech Solutions where I tell people how to lock their shit up, and how to get this stuff straight. And so much of it is just getting people used to best practices. The simplest one that nobody bothers really to do is if you're going to a website, say where you're going to buy something, where you're putting in credit card information or shit like this, does that website say, does in the address bar, and make sure you have an address bar, does it say HTTPS? Yes. Okay. Is it green? Yeah. Okay. then also click on the little lock icon next to where it says HTTPS, because there should be a lock icon if you're in Chrome or even Firefox and Edge. I think all work the same way. And is the security, it'll bring a little drop-down menu, and it'll tell you what the security certificate is that's securing that site, and thus by default securing your credit card information, right? Does it match? Does it say if you're going to Microsoft.com? Does it say it's from Microsoft? Yes? Oh, good. Okay, then you're fine. That's a very simple best practice. You don't have to do that for every website, but you're going to want to do it for ones where you're putting in some, potentially or, serious personal information. Practice this sort of stuff. AV isn't needed, but you got to educate yourself in a lot of this. Okay. And I know I have such a broad demographic of an audience on Sovryn Tech that, I know if you're a highly technical person, you already knew that, but not everybody is, everybody's at different levels, and some people are just starting out too. So anyway, you can read the rest of the article. It has some other interesting tips, most of which I kind of already covered. But it's just so good to get that vindication for people to finally come out and say, God damn it, stop paying these antivirus companies, all that money. You don't need it anymore. Now, I will say quick, there is an argument to be made for like malware, specific malware, that could infect a machine or a device or whatever. And I do the only one I ever recommend really is Malwarebytes. And I actually recommend that on Mac OS as well as Windows. Like if you really aren't doing best practices like all the way. I mean, I don't run anything on mine, other than Windows Defender when it comes to Windows 10. On Linux, it's a different story, but Malwarebytes is that's the only piece of software where I've found that there's actually a net positive, benefit to running that. And it's very lightweight, and it can handle a lot of issues, but that has a very specific purpose. So that's something you could consider. But as far as antivirus goes, stop paying these people. Let that whole industry it can fall away. And, if you're a Windows user or whatever it is. Anyway, we'll be back with some more Sovryn Tech.
The reviews are in, and Babylon 5's a winner. The New York Daily News says Babylon 5 could make Star Wars look like a walk in the park. The Chicago Sun-Times calls it a welcome addition to the sci-fi universe. Impressive, perfectly scaled for TV, raves the LA Times. And the Kansas City Star says Babylon 5 is one space station you're likely to want to visit frequently. See for yourself what everyone's talking about on Babylon 5.
Babylon 5 is available for download on your favorite torrent site. See it now to experience the greatest show in television history. Babylon 5.
Internet of Targets.
It is time for Internet of Targets, where generally we talk about IoT and how that entire market category, that being Internet of Things to be hacked, Internet of Things, just needs to die. Just let it go, because you want to talk about security exploits. Antivirus has nothing on just how terrible Internet of Things, is really has the potential, not just potential, has been. Again, remember, the Internet outage of October 21st against Dyn was, enacted by, turning IoT devices into, a gigantic botnet. I mean, that how do you stand up against that? So IoT is a terrible thing, and something I talked about, and we talk about other various aspects of IoT, but pretty much all these internet connected devices that maybe don't need to be. One of the ones that I was worried about recently was this iBand Plus, which was, something you wore on your head when you went to sleep, and it worked as a sleep tracker, but kind of more what it was shooting for was being a device that could initiate lucid dreams while you sleep. It could make you experience a lucid dream, which lucid dreaming is when you're dreaming and you can take control of the dream, and you can control the dream. And so it's this very, if the concept is real. And I had talked about it. We talked about lucid dreaming in general during IoT or during Internet of Targets 2-3 weeks ago. And I mentioned that, hey, it's actually it's tough to even prove that it's a thing, because you sort of have to take people's word for it that has it. There's no, there's certain different frequencies that you can kind of track the brain is doing at a certain point when people claim to be lucid dreaming, but it's very tough to kind of prove that it's a thing. That doesn't mean necessarily that I think it doesn't exist. I am definitely very skeptical of IBAN Plus. Like, I don't think that actually works. But lucid dreaming may be a reality. I got a couple of really thoughtful responses to that segment, and so I want to read them here, and it is about lucid dreaming. Here's one. Hey, I've been meaning to message you since the Q&A where you talked about lucid dreams. Well, it was actually it was an IoT segment. Whatever, that's fine. You seem skeptical of that machine. First off, folks, I put out so much content. Please, I don't mind if you forget which segment or what episode or whatever. I mean, because I just keep pouring this stuff out, so it's fine. Reading on. You seem skeptical of that machine. I am also skeptical of the machine, but it also seemed like you thought lucid dreaming might not even be real. Lucid dreaming is definitely real. I don't lucid dream often, but I have had a couple dozen lucid dreams. I'm not very good at it. Usually once I become lucid, I start flying and then either wake up or fall back into non-lucid dreaming. When I was in, this person had experienced being, locked away. I had this recurring dream of, and I'm sorry for that, by the way, recurring dream of getting out of prison and going back to a place I used to work. It got to the point that whenever I started having that dream, I would check and see if I was dreaming. I actually went to that place the day I got out, and it was surreal as fuck. I can imagine. The way I check is by looking at my watch, remembering the time, looking away, and then back at the watch. In a dream, times displayed on digital clocks, analog won't work, is completely random. So if there is wildly different times displayed, you are dreaming. The idea is to make a habit of double checking your watch when awake so that eventually you will do it in a dream. Anyway, there's some anecdotal evidence of lucid dreaming for you. So thank you for sharing that. That's pretty interesting, and that's very specific. I kind of like that, the idea of looking at the clocks or the digital clocks, and you'll see that they kind of all have, very different times. And so that's sort of how you're in a dream. And then you can start thinking, okay, I'm going to take control of this dream, right? Like that's kind of the gist. Two comments on this, and then I want to read one more. So I'm skeptical whether or not they exist because I don't think I've ever been in one, even though like the flying dream. Now I've actually, and I hope she doesn't mind me sharing this, I've actually talked to the lovely and hyper intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy, about this. We always talk about the flying dreams. They're our favorite dreams. And it's really something. That's quite a feeling, but I don't ever remember flying, and I can't really ask her right this second. I don't remember flying and knowing that I was dreaming, but I love those flying dreams. Just saying that right there. But yeah, I wouldn't go so strong as to say they don't exist. But I definitely have a bit of skepticism about them. And I have another point I want to bring up, but I want to read this other email as well. I understand your skepticism about lucid dreaming. Thank you. But I assure you it's a real phenomenon. History buff that you are, you should know that humans have been dreaming lucidly for millennia. Cultures all over the planet develop techniques to induce and maintain dream lucidity. Tibetan monks call it dream yoga. Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas, and even Freud talked about how people who had lucid dreams, Persian Sufis not only practiced lucid dreaming, they practiced shared lucid dreams. I've only had a few lucid dreams in my life. It's very hard to do, and I'm terrible at keeping a dream journal. But I guarantee it's an exhilarating experience if you can hold it, because you can fly or have awesome sex. And Stallion breaking in, those are both of the things I want to dream about. Flying either, like Superman, or put me on a starship, baby, and then let's have the awesome sex. God damn it. Damn right. Reading on. It feels as real as waking life. If I may recommend a short but great book, read The Lucid Dreamer by Malcolm Godwin. Now, I haven't read this book yet, but I am going to do that. But thank you for both emailers. Thank you for your thoughts on that. And yeah, I am just skeptical. I'm definitely not at the point where I can say it doesn't happen. Like I don't feel, that confident in it. I really don't think I've ever had one. But there's kind of an interesting point here to be. So to the historical point, yes, there have been claims of lucid dreaming. I think they often get mixed in quite a bit with like visions, or vision quests and things of this nature. To where, it could be more that. I mean, even when you look at particularly like the dream yoga, or even a lot of meditation practices, it seems to be almost getting you to that place where you're like half awake you're kind of sleeping, but you still have that level of control to where, you have, you could potentially have a lucid dream. So maybe a lot of visions were really just lucid dreams kind of being laid out. Because I certainly don't think that anybody's conversing with the almighty or the supernatural, because neither exist. That's something I'm certain about. So, yeah, your historical argument is a good one, I think, and it's an interesting one to consider, and definitely lays it more towards, for me personally, you're absolutely right. It lays it more towards, I'm leaning more towards, yes, they're absolutely true, or not that they're absolutely true, but that they exist. So, but kind of the other point I want to bring up, just real quickly, and the second emailer kind of hinted at this, is that it's interesting just how quickly. And I mean, this has wide-ranging ramifications, and I'd love to talk about it more at some point. But it's amazing how quickly, or how much, no matter what crazy shit is happening in a dream. Oftentimes when you're dreaming and you're not lucid dreaming, as in you're dreaming, you can take control. It's amazing how much your mind, no matter how certain you are of so many facts, of gravity, of all, the laws of physics and all these different things, just how much you completely accept that what's going on is totally normal. When your Aunt Matilda, is walking on the ceiling and tossing down cupcakes or something, or there's purple wombats dancing in the bathtub. I mean, you just accept these things. It's like, oh, well, of course that's what happens. That's a very, very interesting thing that a concept that I don't think gets explored enough is, why does the human mind so readily accept what is obviously not possible? In your dreams? Maybe there's explanations out there and I don't know about them. Like an explanation, say something to the effect of, that maybe like your brain has maybe a different, not a different chemical process going on, but something going on up there to where, you're not really playing with a full deck and you don't have your full reasoning capabilities or something. I mean, that's probably the answer, but it is so interesting that people just readily accept the most nonsensical, crazy, out of this world stuff going on in your dream. They treat it as absolute reality until they wake up, and then they know, that was just a dream. But that's really interesting. So that's a subject for a completely other time, but one I'd love to get into. But it's not really for an Internet of Turns segment. Anyway, thank you so much for the emails. Keep them coming, baby. Woo! Now, baby, I got to tell you, when I want to keep an eye on things, all things going on in the cryptocurrency space, when I want to keep an eye on prices, when I want to know about the new tools, the new wallets, or what are the best ones to use, all of that stuff, or when I want to get social when it comes to cryptocurrency, I go to cryptocompare.com. Oh man, I love this website. I'm not kidding when I say I leave it open 24/7 on my big rig. It's ready for whenever a question comes up for me, for Sovryn Tech about something in crypto or whatever. I'm always checking that out, and just to keep an eye on things, just to know what's going on, to keep fresh, keep that flavor going. And they list off everything, Bitcoin, all your altcoins, they got you covered. So I want you to check out cryptocompare.com, and I cannot thank them enough for being a sponsor of Sovryn Tech. All right, let's get back to the show.
The Climax.
It is time for the Climax, where I get to talk about whatever the hell I want to talk about. And I just want to apologize right out from the gate. I so wanted, there was a subject that I want to talk about that I wanted to do for tech history that I'm just not going to be able to get to this week. And affiliates, I got to let you know right out of the gate, this episode's going to go a little long because I want to talk about what I do want to talk about for the Climax this week. But yeah, I apologize. I'm going to have to push it off just a little bit. I always feel like I'm pushing stuff off, but anyway, everybody still seems to love what I'm putting out. So good. Thank you so much for everybody that's been along for the ride. And really, so many of you have been along the ride for like 5 years. Wow. Most of the emails I get is, hey, been listening since episode 1. And I'm just like, holy shit, you are thank you. Thank you so much. Because I've had, there's been points where I've had changes of heart, changes of mind, changes of direction, and people stick right through it. And boy, that just means the world to me. So I always love getting your emails. Thank you. Even if I can't respond to every email, and I certainly, usually don't get to them, every one of them in a show, unless, like, say you're a patron. And even then, now there's so many patrons, it's hard to keep up. But, I do try to get to every single question that gets asked and everything that anybody wants to talk about. And I certainly do read every single email, even the hate mail. So thank you for all of that. Anyway, okay. What I want to get into for the climax, I actually kind of have a bunch. I'm going to cheat here a little bit. Usually I just stick to one thing to talk about, but I got a few things I kind of want to talk about. There's one big one, but there's a few here. One is that, kind of a sad omission that I made last week. Album of 2016. I gave it to 6 a.m.'s Prayers for the Damned. Of course, they did a double album because they released Prayers for the Blessed in November of 2016. But an album that really, like, not that it's better than Prayers for the Damned, but it should have been an honorable mention, so I'm going to mention it now, was from Iron Savior. I had not heard of this band until last year, but they've been around for like 10 years. Iron Savior, they came out with their album Titancraft. And Iron Savior, every album, they're kind of a progressive metal band, but a little more heavier emphasis on the metal. But each one of their albums is a science fiction story. I mentioned this album when it first came out on Sovryn Tech, but I just want to make sure people know, like, this was one of the best albums of 2016, easy. And each album is a concept, and it's a whole story. This album in particular was about the Titancraft, and it's all science fiction, and it's just so good. It's such a heavy rocker and such a cool story, and some of it's really like very, fist pumping, uplifting kind of music. I like that in my metal, kind of power metal, right? Definitely a power metal band. That might be the best term for them. So if you want to check that out, Iron Savior, Titancraft, so good. Also, boy, a ton of albums came out this week, and it's actually pretty relevant to what the main thing I want to talk about. Stephen Pearcy's album Smash came out this week, which Stephen Pearcy, of course, best known for being the lead singer of Rat. What a great band. Totally not underrated. I mean, they got their MTV play, certainly. And, Out of the Cellar, I mean, like, they sold albums, but they don't seem to have had the longevity of people remembering just how many great fucking songs, that they've had out there. And even they had that album come out in like 2009, 2010, Infestation. One of the best albums, just straight up ever. Like, opens right up and it just kicks your ass, in the way that really only Stephen Pearcy and Rat can. But Stephen Pearcy came out with another solo album this year, in this year, 2017, Smash, it's called, and it's a pretty straightforward rocker, but I love Stephen Pearcy's voice. He has that really unique, kind of high-pitched, almost metallic voice, and he kind of delivers on that, and I liked it. Again, it's just a total straight rocker. I thought it was really good. The other album that came out this week, too, was the new Black Star Riders, Heavy Fire. Black Star Riders, now you might not, that name probably won't mean anything to you unless you're already a fan of them. But what it actually is, Black Star Riders is the remaining members, along with the new singer, of Thin Lizzy. And it's them making new music, because Thin Lizzy won't release an album, ever since their original singer died back in the 80s. So Black Star Riders is, I mean, it's that kind of that Thin Lizzy style. It is so cool. They're like 3 albums in, but their newest one just came out, Heavy Fire. I thought that was really, really good. I'm a huge Thin Lizzy fan, and everything Black Star Riders has done, I just get so excited. Fun, good hard rock album. I really like that. But the jewel in the crown this week, as far as music that came out, and we're going to talk about something besides music, but I mentioned it at the head of the show, the 30th anniversary edition of Turbo of Turbo Lover from not just Turbo. They're calling the album Turbo 30, but of Turbo Lover from Judas Priest. Holy shit. They did a remastering. The remastering is phenomenal. It is such a hard punching album. I know a lot of Judas Priest fans don't like Turbo Lover, or they didn't like the album Turbo. I get it. They think it's like, it's a little more pop metal, like it's a little more mainstream, maybe a little Bon Jovi, but I understand that point, but I just so disagree. It is such almost track for track. Maybe the only weak track on there might be like Rockin' All Around the World or Reckless. Even those are good songs. But Out in the Cold, Turbo Lover, Private Property, Parental Guidance, Locked In, even ones that didn't make like the radio so much. Hot for Love. Oh, Hot for Love is such a good song. So releasing this, I mean, this is amazing. I'm just glad that they're giving it, that Judas Priest is recognizing it was a thing and that they're giving it credit. And it's a 3-disc. The other 2 discs are from a couple of live shows, both of which are rock solid. I listened to the whole thing last night. And my only complaint about the album, the live cuts are great. The remastering is just punching. It's so good. But I was hoping for some extra tracks from that era. And we know they exist because when Priest came out with their big box set, Metallology, a few years ago, that was like a decade ago, I think. When they came out with Metallology, they released a new track on there called Heart of the Lion. And that was from the Turbo sessions. That was from when they were doing Turbo. And it was a cool song. It was a great song. And I was hoping that, sadly, not even Heart of the Lion's on this album. And it would make sense for it to be there because it was part of the Turbo recordings. So little disappointed that there weren't any bonus tracks effectively that weren't live cuts. But it's still really good. And it just probably, Turbo's probably my favorite Priest album. I mean, I love it. So I was rocking that out last night. Okay. And then I was doubleheading with this game's amazing, and you're going to want to get a copy of it. I put a link in the show notes. It's in the appendix of the show notes. Get it before it gets a takedown notice. Mega Man 2.5. This game is so cool. It is Mega Man in not 3D, but in what's that game? Fez. It's like Fez, to where you're not seeing like 3D objects, but you can move around, like the entire screen can kind of shift perspective to where it becomes 2.5. And also there's like a depth perception that almost creates like a faux 3D of 2-dimensional objects like Mega Man himself. And so, yeah, Mega Man 2.5, check that out if you haven't. That is a lot of fun, really cool, really well done. But the real winner that I spent a lot of time rocking was Double Dragon 4. Oh, this just came out. Arc System Works ended up getting the rights to the Double Dragon games. And now a lot of people don't know this, but so Double Dragon, easily one of the greatest, game franchises of all time. So much fun. Not that it doesn't have its misses. It hits and misses. It has its misses and it has its hits. Okay. But a lot of people don't realize is that in 1991, when Double Dragon 3 came out, which was, personally, I didn't care for it. I thought it sucked on NES. In arcades, it was a little bit better. The reason why it sucked is that you could only get hit once. I mean, obviously it was kind of realistic in that, and the graphics were really cool too. But it was so hard and just so frustrating, because of that one hit rule, or mechanic of the game. As to where, in Double Dragon 1 and 2, you can get hit a few times and you move on. In fact, your life bar is kind of an essential, like a strategic component of the game. So Double Dragon 3 came out in 1991. Most people didn't like it because of what I just said. And what's funny is that you then skipped to Double Dragon 5, which came out in like 94, 95, something like that. And then you also had Super Double Dragon, which was just Super Double Dragon. It wasn't actually, Double Dragon 4. And you had the great Double Dragon and Battletoads, or Battletoads and Double Dragon, I think it was technically called, the Ultimate Team. That was the name of the game, which was a lot of fun. Played like classic Double Dragon 1, Double Dragon 2. Double Dragon 2 is considered the greatest, of them all, generally. And I would kind of agree with that, though I think Double Dragon 4 has given it a hell of a run for its money. So, there was a lot of skipping around. Double Dragon 4 was never a thing. Something that should have come out in 1992 or 1993 didn't. And Double Dragon 5 kind of sucks. Double Dragon 5 was just a copy of Street Fighter, pretty much. They made it into a fighting game with some degree of a quest mode and all this. And it was actually based off of something that didn't suck, which was the Double Dragon cartoon from the early 1990s, which you can actually, I think you can watch in its entirety on YouTube, where, you know, they fight the shadow and, you know, I know the code of the dragon. You didn't come here, you know, to hear me sing, but I love that cartoon. Went 2 seasons even. It was just really, really good. So Double Dragon 5 was actually kind of didn't have anything to do, because that cartoon certainly didn't. Kind of had nothing to do with previous Double Dragon games. So it was even a misnomer to call it Double Dragon 5. Now, Super Double Dragon for Super Nintendo, that was like graphically it was cool. It kind of followed the same stylings as Double Dragon 2, but if you're only playing that one player, it's just way too fucking hard. I mean, it doesn't have the one hit rule like Double Dragon 3 does, but it is so hard. You get ganged up like there's no tomorrow. Like, I mean, that is a real issue with Super Double Dragon. Again, Battletoads and Double Dragon, that game's great. I have no complaints about that. It's one of the best. Any Battletoads game is generally just phenomenal. I'm still waiting for, because Microsoft owns that property now. I'm waiting for them to release a Windows 10 Battletoads game, you know, a modern one. That is something that really needs to exist. And I will keep a Windows 10 machine around just to play that. But anyway, so Super Double Dragon kind of had that problem where the AI in the game like would gang up on you. And when you're single player, it was way too fucking hard. Like, I mean, it just really is. And believe me, you know, no, I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm pretty fucking good at video games. Okay. I design them as well. Like I'm pretty good. Like I've done, you know, Mortal Kombat tournaments. I know the deal. So anyway, I think with Double Dragon 4, which just came out, I think January 30th was the release date for PS4 and PC. Of course, I got it on Steam. And it was only it's like $7-10, something like that. I mean, depending on what platform you're getting it on, you know, that's what the game runs for. I think they paid attention. I think, you know, a lot of people are complaining about it, saying it plays too much like a retro game, like it plays too much like Double Dragon 2. I don't see that as a negative. I get that if you want just games with retro styling, but they don't play like classics, okay, that's your metrics. And I understand that. And I don't mean any disrespect towards you. But for me, that's exactly what I want. Like for a while on Sovryn Tech, it seemed like there was some months, some of episodes where like every week during Game Talk, I could tell you about a new game that was actually a new game where somebody found the cartridge for it that never got released in stores, you know, ripped the ROM off of it and released it on the internet, and you could play a game kind of like Happily Ever After, which I know you're thinking Snow White, how good could that be? It's one of the best platformers ever made. You know, and it plays just like a classic game. I like the fact that this game is somewhat limited in its gameplay ability. But there's, you know, I think they made improvements in the right spaces. For one, some people have argued about the AI, but I don't think they understand. I think Arc System Works knew what they were doing. And I think they looked at Super Double Dragon and they said, okay, the AI is nuts here when you're single player. We want to match this kind of gameplay, because when you're playing Super Double Dragon with a couple people, it's great. Or at least it's a, you know, it's a solid experience, I should say. I don't know if I'd say it's great. And so I think they made the AI a little easier at first, just so you can get the hang of it single player, you know, and I thought that was the right move. Like, cause the game might seem easy until you get to like mission 6. That's how I found it to be, is that it was, I mean, not like super easy, but easy enough. If you're doing 2-player, you will wipe the floor with it until you get to like mission 6. But yeah, I think they paid attention to that. They knew what they were putting in. Now there's new moves in the game, which is really cool. Like you can do this kind of flying knee or this like twisting headbutt that can really like, I mean, you can send guys flying across the screen, and nice additions, perfect additions. Like I really think that added to the game. So there's new moves. The other nice thing about the game is that you have a dedicated jump button now, because, you know, we're not dealing with only 2 buttons on the controller, right? That was kind of the problem with the, you know, the original Double Dragon trilogy, at least on NES, was that to jump, like to do a jump kick, you had to like really perfectly time pressing B and A at the same time, and, you know, and then left or right or whatever to be able to do a jump kick, which is a very powerful move. So it's great to have that, you know, now that we have modern controllers, to take advantage of the fact that, okay, no, we can make a dedicated jump button in this game. So, I mean, that alone makes this game for me, it puts it above Double Dragon 2 just for that. just the fact that the controls are so much slicker now. And you unlock things as you beat missions. You unlock characters and other stuff. There's different modes, like there's tower mode. There's a whole bunch of stuff to unlock that, and in fact, this is the cool thing. It has the original versus mode. So this also functions as a fairly sophisticated fighting game. Okay, kind of like a Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, but of course in 8-bit and with, more classic controls. But each character has like these different moves that you can enact. There's combos, all this different stuff that really works well. So you can play it as a 2-player or, as a single player, but then you could also rock, 2-player, you could do the duel where you have different characters and you have a pretty broad selection of characters from within the game that you can choose from. It was so cool. I mean, I felt, you can't imagine how I was feeling. So I love this game. I think I recommend it without reservations, unless you hate retro gameplay. And I mean gameplay, not styling. I mean gameplay. If you hate retro gameplay, yeah, don't buy it. But if you do, oh man, this is the Double Dragon game that literally we've been waiting for. Like for me, I know me and my friends back in the 90s, we all pretty much like, all right, Double Dragon 2, and then we'll go play, Battletoads and Double Dragon. Right. But if we had if we had Double Dragon 4 back then, oh, this is the right stuff. I mean, it is such a good fucking game. If it came out in 2016, I would have given it Game of the Year. It might end up being Game of the Year for 2017 because just the amount of fidelity that they paid to the Double Dragon series. I mean, and you still kind of get like a little bit of the storyline like you had in Double Dragon 3. They really put together all the best parts of every Double Dragon game, in my opinion, and they put it into a Double Dragon 2 kind of, setup, and it just plays like magic. It's so good. So yeah, last night, like I said, I was listening to Stephen Pearcy. I was listening to Judas Priest, and I'm rocking out. I was playing a little Mega Man, and then I'm rocking out Double Dragon 4, baby. I was in a time warp, and I had some Diet Coke next to me. It was the 90s all over again. Oh hell. I was, what's that song by Joe Lynn Turner, and Yngwie Malmsteen? This could be paradise. Oh, it was paradise. I was having the time of my life. It was so good. Oh God. So check it out. Get it on Steam. Do what you got to do. Get your hands on Double Dragon 4. I thought it was so good. Grab that classic remaster, or grab that remaster of a classic Judas Priest album. Jump on it, and if you want to be really saucy this week, why don't you become a Sovryn Tech patron? Just go to solutions.zog.ninja and you can become a patron right there. Content coming out all the time. Woo! Anyway, maybe I'll go hit up some more of that Double Dragon 4, baby. Here we go.
You just
See you on the other side.
Sovryn Tech. Go to solutions.zog.ninja. That's SOVRYN tech.com. And connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.